My name is Erica Lorraine Spencer, and I remain subject to state surveillance and terrorism by the state of California that is operating a malicious targeting system which is referred to as federal group stalking and monitoring via communication devices. And it is in violation of federal stalking statute 18 U.S.C. sections 2261A subsections 1 and 2. My website and podcast serve the public good by publishing evidence of the public entity's ceaseless engagement in a pattern of conduct intended to stalk and monitor via communication devices, surveil, harass, and terrorize an American citizen in concert with the people of the state of California. Documentation serves the lawful purposes of wide exposure, federal prosecution, and influencing federal legislation with policies specifically designed to punish, dismantle, and disincentivize an unprecedented targeting system by a public entity that acts in concert with the people of the state in order to criminally place under surveillance and terrorize an American citizen, which is a matter of public corruption in the state of California. Notice: intellectual property theft is particularly egregious and equally unlawful where the sole inventor and creator of the intellectual property is the targeted individual. Erica Lorraine Spencer, subject to the unconstitutional and inhumane government system of gang stalking, otherwise referred to as federal group stalking and monitoring via communication devices, because of which the intellectual property created by the targeted individual, who is, in fact, Erica Lorraine Spencer, as the intellectual property also proves, serves to establish via evidence and expose the existence of criminal surveillance and thus an inherent threat posed by the U.S. government and the civilian population sharing engagement in the unlawful system. Such evidence, that includes all of the content created by Erica Lorraine Spencer, images, videos, audio, etc., belongs solely and entirely to Erica Lorraine Spencer only and is necessarily published online in order to protect her life, safety, and liberty as the targeted individual, who is also the intellectual property owner, no less protected from theft procured through targeting by a public entity. Theft of any intellectual property belonging to Erica Lorraine Spencer, which is necessarily committed while she, being both creator and inventor, remains oppressed by the public entity via criminal surveillance, is a criminal and inhumane means of infringement under all circumstances and not protected nor enforceable pursuant to any invalid or fraudulent acts of copyright, trademarks, patents, etc., including as it pertains to any ideas associated with or generated from the intellectual property or the intellectual property owner, Erica Lorraine Spencer, whether creative, business, or otherwise, nor does the intellectual property owner consent to any such means of infringement and theft. Erica Lorraine Spencer here. The following is an audio version of video evidence that is captured for purposes of mass distribution, which is why I am capturing it and sharing it on the podcast for evidentiary purposes and also to reveal the wealth of documentation that extends beyond what it is that I document on podcasts. Much of the video and images will be published onto the YouTube channel, the P.O.C, and it is also shared on the Google Drive. Again, this is for purposes of revealing what I remain subject to, which is federal group stalking and monitoring. It is a demonic system of state surveillance that the government is practicing in concert with the people of the state, and it should be known and well understood that for the government to engage in federal group stalking and monitoring, this is a crime that is committed with a criminal purpose to threaten the life of an American citizen. This is to conspire to murder and or permanently kidnap an American citizen while engaging in a perpetual sex offense in concert with the people of the state. P.O.C. That's the entity stuck by helicopter. Okay, you see Alyssa? You see Brianna? They're going to prison. They're going to federal prison, and so is Jason Fields. Okay, the reason why they're targeting me inside of the Upland Public Library, that's a stalker. You're looking at the U.S. military. Follow me in Upland, California. That's Carissa up there. Carissa's going to prison. The entity's targeting at the location where I'm at and the entity's doing so based on the message that was just sent to everybody. Jason Fields is a co-conspirator of murder, not someone that I'm going to reconcile with. Clearly, he is very well familiar with Tracy Banks' vagina, who is my mom. There will not be any relationship or association with a terrorist and with a co-conspirator of these homosexuals stalking me in Upland, California by helicopter. Okay, the entity is doing that while they're monitoring my vagina in the bathroom, where Alyssa, a homosexual predator, Carissa, a homosexual predator, Joy, a homosexual predator. This is the psychopath that's sitting in their offices, gang stalking. As I move, this demon gets up and monitoring. Psychopathic pacing. And acting like the helicopter activity is not happening. These are the mentally ill. And these are Jason Fields' co-conspirators. Jason Fields comes anywhere near me, he's going to prison. I'm already prosecuting him. There will be no reconciliation. And while I publish that, all the demons are very upset because Jason Fields is a demon, and this entity thought that they had an insider, and that's because they're fools. That's because they're mentally ill. The entity, I just want to be clear, Adam Tuckerman is the one that's going to prison. Joy, Alan, Carissa, Elizabeth, Laura, they're all going to federal prison. Bill Velto's in the adjacent building, the gang-stalking city hall of Upland, California. This is going to be subject to martial law. This is the P.O.C, and this is showing what's going on in Ontario, which you already know. You've got the employees at Wendy's that are going to federal prison for poisoning me. You have the entity gang stalking me at the Stater Brothers. All those employees are going to federal prison for gang stalking, vagina monitoring, and poisoning me. And the entity is following me around from place to place, city to city, and targeting me by helicopter, while the demon, the terrorist, the sex offender, the co-conspirator of murder, Jason Fields, is the subject matter regarding a terrorist who is going immediately to prison if he ever comes around me. He's going to return what he stole, and he will stay far away from me for the rest of his life, however much left he has. Because this mentally ill gang stalker has put out black magic, which is going to attack him, and it's not touching me. In the same way that stalking me by helicopter is putting him in prison. It's not affecting me. I'm documenting it. This is P.O.C, Upland Public Library. Gang stalker. P.O.C. This is all engineer light. All of this is engineer light. So just so you can see, here's the fake sun that the entity is covering up. Covering up the fake sun is no evidence of the absence of the fake sun. The sun would never be present in the places and for the duration of time that I've documented it as a matter of record, where it doesn't go anywhere, where the entity is engaging, by the way, the same stalking system, and the fake sun arrives seconds later, moments later, where the entity is stalking by helicopter. This is P.O.C. These are demons. Jason is no ordinary predator. He's a demon-possessed one, and the demons wanted that demon to create some sort of delusional narrative that he is going to divorce my mom and then begin having sex with me, like that would ever happen. Mental illness is real, people, okay? This is a message of Christ Jesus. He is coming back, and the demon-possessed have failed in trying to secretly keep us all under surveillance so that we don't know what's going on. Jason Fields and the rest of the demons are going to prison, and they're also going to be involuntarily committed. This is the fake sun right over me, where the entity just engaged in providing evidence against all the employees that are going to prison. They're not in here teaching, they're not studying, they're not reading, they're not engaging in what is anything protected under the Constitution. It's surveillance. And they're mentally ill while they engage in that. This is P.O.C. They're vagina monitors, keeping my vagina under surveillance in that bathroom. This is P.O.C. It's 1:17 p.m. There will be no relationship with a vagina monitor like Jason Fields. He's a sex offender. And that's why he was with Tracy Banks, engaging in what is obsessing over my vagina, her and him together, and it's failed witchcraft. And it's going to have them committed, both of them. P.O.C. Alrighty, this is follow-up documentation regarding the ongoing systematic poisoning that I remain subject to by this entity. I just want to be clear. Wendy's, restaurants, Stater Brothers, 7-Eleven, markets, the entity that's engaged in what is poisoning as I go to a particular facilitated venue is the same exact entity that's engaging in this same exact uniform pattern of conduct. And in turn, this entity is subject to what is a federal prosecution for that ongoing battery to my person, furtherance of murder and furtherance of irreversible trauma, in furtherance of seeking to harm me physically while psychologically torturing me, incessantly while stalking me, incessantly sexually violating me, incessantly, and also the entity that's engaging in this is creating what are physical symptoms that I also want to document. And then also with regard to the digestive issues, the entity is engaging what is monitoring in the bathroom, monitoring my vagina. So they're engaging in what is tampering with poisoning food that I'm consuming. And then they are doing so with knowledge of who I am. This is relevant to the involuntary commitments that shall result from the prosecution of the entity. Third parties such as Lupe, while I'm poisoned by that restaurant, and yet Lupe is stating she doesn't know who I am. Also, the criminal pattern of conduct is also direct evidence rebutting that clearly false and malicious statement. But this is a misrepresentation of fact by a third party, a demon, a gang stalker, the government that is engaging in this pattern of conduct, that's engaging in surveillance, that will lie to your face. Okay? The fact that you're being poisoned is speaking to targeting. Targeting directly rebuts, disproves that you're ignorant about who I am and that you are a stranger as well. The entity is engaging in this under the fake sun. The entity then engages in what is stalking me in the bathroom, while they engage in that mentally ill pattern of conduct pursuant to what is causing complications that are physically affecting me. This is very mentally ill as well. This is psychopathic, okay? And this is why I just also want to point out with regard to the physical symptoms, which I'm going to articulate in this podcast, relevant to damages and relevant to the entity that's going to prison. The entity is already subject to federal prison for gang stalking. Gang stalking is a act of terrorism. It's domestic terrorism in the U.S. by the government. That's acting through a population, even where you are in your bed and the targeted individual is outside. The U.S. government and the people are engaging in criminal surveillance. You are subject to prison. That is justice. I have stated at the outset, it is impracticable, however, because of the fact that the U.S. government is engaging in surveillance with an entire population. It is not impracticable that where an American citizen is subject to the pattern of conduct and is subject to systematic poisoning, in other words, seeking to take their life and physically harm them, batter them in every way. When you go to the doctor, when you go to any venue where, such as when you're going out to eat, when you are in your home and perhaps you have some sort of assistance that comes to your home, medical or otherwise, when you are subject to this conduct and the entity is targeting you through the food that you buy, whether you go to the venue and purchase it or have it delivered, the entity that is targeting you with specific knowledge of who you are, thus the ongoing targeting, including through what you are consuming. It is not impracticable. It is justice. Everywhere that you are eating at what is a gang stalking venue, consuming things from a gang stalking venue, and that is federal prison. So in other words, the entity that's engaging in criminal surveillance is an entity that is unlucky, if you will. This is a backfire regarding the entity that is able to very seamlessly get rid of people in the world and in the United States of America by merely publishing an FDA warning to the rest of the country stating, oh, we found radioactive shrimp, be careful, when they already killed off the targeted individual, and then use that with regard to warning everyone else about the recall of shrimp from Walmart. Walmart that is gang stalking. Walmart that engaged in what is a targeted act that is intended to harm irreparably an American citizen that it is illegally keeping under surveillance and is not ignorant about the content of the products that they are selling, especially when they're selling them to you under the fake sun, especially when they're doing so while the U.S. military is keeping you under surveillance at that venue and route to and from that venue. And based on the entity's criminal pattern of conduct, where you are engaging in criminal surveillance as the United States is with every single corporation formed, and those corporations, those companies are in the business of selling food products, you are automatically subject to prison. And it is not impracticable. You're talking about the fraction of the population that's engaged in serving food upon criminal surveillance, and that is an unlawful threat. A threat that is in the same way when you are engaged in an unlawful threat that is inadequately addressed by a subsequent court case after you have already been subject to what is loss of life by a gang stalking police officer. who is capable of taking your life at that criminal encounter that they are forcing upon you while they're stalking and exercising fictitious authority while wearing that uniform and representing that department. It is prison, period. With regard to those that are engaged in the food industry, with those that are engaged in providing food products, they will be subject to federal prison. They shall be subject to federal prison based on their criminal engagement in the pattern of conduct and the unlawful threat posed to American citizens or those around the globe that are subject to those surveilling companies that are also targeting you through poisoning you, which is too immediate, too severe of a threat to permit merely a lawsuit, a case for damages, and even a prosecution as a terrorist. You're going to face prison. This is P.O.C. It is currently 3:22 p.m. and what I want to document is that the entity is engaged in poisoning me, and this is pursuant to the purchase of food from Wendy's at 590 East Hope Boulevard in Ontario, California, where the entity is engaged in targeted harassment, locking me out of the restaurant during business hours, gang stalking me with the U.S. military under the fake sun and at night under the fake moon, stalking me by military aircraft, flying over and also amplifying commercial plane activity. That's the same U.S. military using commercial airline companies that shall be prosecuted for domestic terrorism in the United States, which will also be subject to, I want to be clear, gang stalking with commercial planes. You're talking about an unlawful threat that is too high with regard to what is immediate prison. Prison terms are resulting from stalking, gang stalking, criminal surveillance using your commercial airline company, providing those instrumentalities of interstate commerce to the U.S. military based on the immediate harm, which is reasonably foreseeable. Planes crashing into buildings and into bodies of water and into mountainsides where they are not accidents, they're not tragic mishaps, they are acts of terrorism by those same airline companies that I have shown you are gang stalking in California. And as they cross state lines, threatening the lives of those abroad and threatening the lives of those in the rest of the country. It will be and it shall be federal prison. The entity is engaging in what is gang stalk with the U.S. military at Wendy's. I'm subject to the entirety of that pattern of conduct. And the entity is engaging in this while they are maintaining the specific environment, including in the bathroom. That's Wendy's, the sex offender, and in the restaurant. The bathroom is highlighted with regard to the sex offense that the entity of every iteration, the entity that is a corporation, the entity that are the people of the state collectively acting as a population, keeping you under surveillance, the entity that is the government acting directly. Okay, you are a sex offender where the entity is engaging in that level of surveillance, and Wendy's is engaging in that. Wendy's is a sex offender that's engaged in criminal surveillance through providing what is surveillance with the government, profiting from being in the food industry where they are also serving that government system by poisoning American citizens intentionally, knowingly, maliciously. And that's exactly what the law is going to treat it as, regardless of any regardless of any insufficient argument because of the pattern of conduct. You are intentionally poisoning. Period. The entities think that's like stating that you are accidentally stabbing the murder victim when you intentionally brought the knife to their home. You stood over their bed while they were asleep, and then you stated that you accidentally killed them with that knife. Death with that knife is reasonably foreseeable, and you will be prosecuted for first-degree murder. Okay? You will be prosecuted for intentionally, willfully, knowingly poisoning were the pattern of conduct by the U.S. military, not you claiming that you don't know the targeted individual and that you never met them before and they never ate at your restaurant and you never came out of the back office. You don't know anything about the argument between your subordinates, Lupe, and the rest of the employees. You're being federally prosecuted. Period. There's no constitutional argument. The entity is engaging in this with the U.S. military that is doing so with the entirety of the constituents of the state. That's why the fake sun is over me while you're mindful of what happened yesterday. The entity kept the fake sun over Wendy's restaurant where I'm there before 12:49 p.m. and I leave after 1, and yet the entity has the fake sun over me where they're stalking me by helicopter at the particular location inside of the library. They're flying over the edge of the library where I'm seated, and that's also where the fake sun begins shining at or around 1:13 p.m. The fake sun's remaining over Wendy's yesterday, and that's the fake sun, not the natural environment, because in the natural environment, the environment and the sun, that is engaging in substantially identical conduct on an ongoing, daily, consistent basis this, which is why and how we have meteorologists who are perpetuating the illusion in the United States and around the globe regarding the weather. But with regard to that illusion that they perpetuate, thereby you are prosecuting them for the malicious pattern of conduct by the U.S. military, who are mentally ill, stalking under a fake sun, where you are measuring what was the rainfall the prior year or even decades earlier, where you are measuring what the sun is doing at this time of year. That's based on an ongoing, consistent, calculable basis, a history. This fake sun is random. This fake sun is inconsistent. This fake sun is even idle when I don't leave for the duration of the day. That's the identification of surveillance, and you will be prosecuted for poison pursuant to surveillance, for which there is no legal defense. The entity is engaged in what is poisoning me, and upon my purchase on May 24th, 2026, I am experiencing, which I documented on the podcast and in images and video, I am experiencing digestion issues. I'm experiencing an unnatural urge, a strong urge to use the restroom. And it's abnormal, it's unnatural, and the entity is engaging in this while the entity is poisoning me. There's a consistent physical reaction by my body, which again, laxatives are, this is definitely something that Tracy Banks has done, but this is not necessarily the case. Again, it is also my body, which it may very well be just seeking to eject and reject the substances that are being put in my food. And substances are indeed being put in my food consistently, regardless of the venue that I'm eating at. Even when I don't buy fast food or restaurant food, I can't buy peanut butter and jelly and bread without the entity poisoning me. These are the same psychopaths that are stalking me in the store aisles, that are harassing me, blocking my path so that they can engage in what are methods of gang stalking me, where the venue is filled with that specific environment. This is outside of even the fake sun and the engineer light outside. Because you're gang stalking me outside of the doors, you're gang stalking me inside of that venue. This is common sense, and it's also supported by evidence. They're inside of the store stalking, and they're inside of the store stalking me, the one that they're also poisoning. The entities also created in me physical symptoms such as acid reflux. I don't have acid reflux, but like acid in the back of my throat, as though I ate something acidic, something really spicy. I did not. At Wendy's, I ordered French fries and a strawberry and vanilla swirl, frosty, excuse me, and that's on the record. Okay, so I'm experiencing digestion issues. I'm experiencing strong urgency to use the restroom, even if I don't drink any liquids for the day. And also I'm experiencing what is acid reflux on the back of my throat, like acid coming up from the back of my throat. So that's speaking to what is my body seeking to get rid of the foreign substances that the entity that is stalking me obsessively is putting in my food. And then you're understanding the mental illness of these demons that are stalking. They're following, chasing me down while they're stalking me in helicopters, under a fake sun, in commercial airline planes, following while they're sitting around stalking me, monitoring me, literally my body, my reaction to being poisoned. And they call this witchcraft when it is nothing other than a battery in furtherance of murder, psychological torture, criminal stalking by a population, which is federal group stalking and monitoring, which is the criminal conspiracy to murder. And because the entity is engaged in mentally ill behavior, such as practicing sex rituals with each other and then infecting each other with incurable STDs such as HIV, which is relevant to the prosecution of this entity. Their mental illness, it's relevant because they're engaging in these harms and they are calling it witchcraft. They believe that it is something that is still speaking to their intent, their mental illness, that it is spiritually working what they intend to, that I'm just going to drop dead because it's powerful witchcraft. And it's not, it's the federal charges that I just mentioned and more. Okay, it's also not witchcraft when you're engaged in what is stealing from me. There is a federal physical charge. We are out of the spiritual realm. You're not engaging in any sort of hoodoo, voodoo, hocus pocus that's working because I'm proving it to you while you're being prosecuted. While you are looked at on the internet doing cartwheels and U-turns in the sky space, clearly targeting and stalking in a very deranged manner, you are no longer engaging in any witchcraft. It's not working. And because you first set out to do so, you're engaging in criminal conduct, and you are in your mind convincing yourself that you're accomplishing something that nobody else sees. You're going to be committed. You're being involuntarily committed. The homosexuals of the U.S. military are being committed. The homosexuals of the law enforcement agencies are being involuntarily committed. The homosexual cult members of the population, the people of the state, are being involuntarily committed. The entities engaging in this, while they are engaged in this cult conduct, which I am prosecuting as criminal surveillance, which is exactly what it is. This is the P.O.C. P.O.C, that is plain activity that the entity subdued because I started recording as soon as they were beginning their unintelligent imitation of a takeoff, which doesn't occur over the Civic Center in Ontario, as like the unintelligent fake sun, which doesn't sit over one building all day long and then change the next day and do the same thing at another location, and it's not omnipresent over all of us all day long, not moving over all of us in the same manner. As unintelligent, that's what they're doing, stalking. That's the those are the responses when you're monitoring evidence, when you're monitoring devices. This is the entity that's engaged in poisoning me. So what I want to document is what the entity is engaging in. And this is all relevant to what is going to be prison for the entity. Those of the U.S. military, those of these gang stalking fire departments, these gang stalking EMTs, these gang stalking police departments. They're facing prison, and so are the people of the state who exacerbate that harm. They are in the shoes of the government, keep you under surveillance. They are the hands and feet of the entity. They are the entity, and they are the vicarious arm of that entity, meaning the entity fills the library and is doing so as employees, receiving a paycheck as a terrorist, in other words, because the library is only there to maintain surveillance. All right, and they receive a paycheck under the guise of maintaining an erected building that is for the purpose of criminal surveillance under the guise of a city library where employees are paid to engage in surveillance and perform duties pursuant to whatever type of venue it is. If it's a grocery store, if it's a library, if it's a movie theater, if it's a shopping mall, if it is a clothing market, all right? If it's an apartment complex, they live there. They're occupying presence on behalf of that entity. The entity that you hear stalking me in planes is maintaining surveillance through the population's existence, and they maintain presence everywhere at all times. And as I've also shown you, very unnaturally, especially when you hone in and you investigate and you pay attention, and it's not as natural as the entity intended and assumed that it was. No one's ever investigated it before, okay? And you are also able to see how very clear the entity is targeting and how bad actors that they are. The entity's not even concerned with acting anymore. They are desperately and overtly stalking as obsessed psychopaths who are violent sex offenders. This is the unequivocal position of the demon-possessed that hold positions in government and are also vicariously acting in the shoes of that same state. And those, none of them are private citizens under the Constitution, under the law. This entity is not only engaged in poisoning me, this entity is engaging in poisoning me while gang stalking me, keeping me under criminal surveillance and furtherance of murder. That's maintaining the unabated program of psychological torture. And the entity is also engaged in what is puncturing my feet at night. And so upon examining my foot, that's been sore all day as I've been walking on it, I'm looking at it and I'm looking at two holes on the bottom of my feet. So the entity is poisoning me and taking my bodily fluids and examining what's going on with my system that they're poisoning. So I want to document that. The entity's been engaged in this. They've been systematically poisoning me. This is the entity that is also engaged in surveillance on the venue of the internet. This is for your education. This is for you all who are witnessing. There is nothing that the government is doing in secret. There's nothing that the government is getting away with either. There's nothing that the government is doing that it can claim that it is not guilty of also. So the entity is literally engaging in the criminal activity in front of the world, and the entity is engaged play by play. because of this evidence, because of what it's doing on camera and via podcast. There are no mysteries here, and there's also no mystery regarding the entity that is not sacrificing me, and they are going to pay monetarily, and they're also going to pay with their liberty. And they represent the entity, the people, and the government that's acting directly. They're going to prison, and they will not be getting out based on the criminal system that I have exposed and thereby prosecuted. This is also relevant to terrorists like Jason Fields, who are engaged in terrorizing gang stalking. This is an entity that's engaging in what is essentially playing emotional mind games on the internet with these cult members that are engaging in criminal monitoring, creating content. That's how they're doing it. They create content which is relevant to the surveillance system, targeting you, targeting what you're interested in, and also seeking to emotionally provoke you. These are the games that they're playing. I am, for purposes of maintaining an investigation and also documenting and prosecuting what is surveillance and also theft of my intellectual property, those that are serving in the comprehensive system of surveillance that is underway on the venue, YouTube specifically, where they are engaged in very much targeting. You have the entity that's creating content where they create a very vague disclaimer stating that it's just for entertainment purposes, but it is in every way with regard to what is a very specific and unique circumstance. No one has engaged in what it is that I've done, and the entity is in every regard showing that it is targeting me, doing so before an audience, and that same audience is the entity that is gang stalking. Okay, this is what the entity has designed. The government. This is what this cult that Jason Fields is a part of, that Tracy Banks is a part of, where they're leading in this, and they're also voyeurists. They're violent sex offenders, also watching on the dark web, sex trafficking you, creating content. This is the many facets of the surveillance system, and the entity is engaging in this and speaking to, oh, the tarot cards read this and the tarot cards read that. They're literally talking about the things that they have done, okay? And they're doing so while they are monitoring me, okay? And the no tarot card reader, no demon-possessed monitoring spirit is telling the truth, nor do they have access to the truth. They are not God, and God gives revelation to his prophets. That is no tarot card reader, and this is why they are mixing what is truth with lies, because they're literally monitoring. These are the stalkers that are on YouTube creating this content, and they are targeting in doing so. They are engaged in what is the theft of intellectual property. YouTube that's engaged in stealing and facilitating theft of my property. And this is one of the ways in which the entity engages in that fraudulent system. I do want to document the entity that you hear stalking me in relevant position is the one that's engaged in what is a comprehensive means of targeting me. And in addition to that, the entity is poisoning me systematically. And then you're talking, when I'm documenting at night, these are demons that are stalking me, sitting around the bench that I sleep on outside. They're engaging in that while the entity is stalking me all night long via traffic, okay, surveillance on the roads and the highways, surveillance by sitting around me, stalking all night long, not sleeping. The demons that lay down, they are not sleeping. These are monitoring spirits. The moment that I get up, they do too. The moment that I get up, even if they don't get up, another demon is engaging in what is relevant positioning. They are not sleeping. They're engaging in obsessive, psychopathic, desperate surveillance, including the more that I document, just like I documented at the library today. At the moment that I admonish the demons to stop and leave me alone, a demon comes closer and sits right next to me in the library. That's surveillance that's coordinated on the internet and in relevant position. Pursuant to this demonic vagina monitor, this terrorist, this psychopath, this sex offender, this thief and stalker, Jason Isaac Fields. Okay, this is speaking to the coordination of the surveillance system that is comprehensive. That is not only physical, but it is on your devices and on the venue of the internet, which is designed to maintain surveillance. Okay, the entity is engaged in what is puncturing my feet. This is a battery, and this is also very sick behavior. While they are engaging in what is essentially voyeurism, the entity is basically stalking obsessively, poisoning, psychologically torturing. That is monitoring you. This is sitting up studying you. Imagine somebody just placing a chair in front of you, right underneath your chin, and staring at you and not blinking, not moving. That's what the entity is doing while they're monitoring, spiritually speaking. It's very sick behavior. This is what a population is doing, and the demon possessed seek to do that by maintaining the surveillance system, which shows that is the proof that they are entirely obsessed and mentally ill and violent sex offenders. And they do it under the guise of being strangers, and none of them are strangers in that environment. And they are all there to specifically target you, whom they are aware of, you and your identity, including your genitalia and the state of your genitalia. They know how many people you've had sex with. They know if you've never had sex before. They know if you want to have sex. They know if you watch sex on the internet. They know the last people that you've been sexually engaged. Just to give you an example of the way in which you are subject to a study by demons who are obsessed with you. It's the spirit of Satan that's possessing a population. They engage in what is voyeurism, but this is voyeurism on another level. Voyeurism on steroids. And it is that which has never been contemplated under federal law. The entity is doing this, monitoring you while they are physically stalking you. And they're engaging in surveillance also regarding what you are doing on the internet, if anything at all, on your devices, if anything at all, if you have any. And not even if you have any, if you go to a library like I am and you use anything, surveillance is underway on every device on the internet everywhere. So there is no such thing as privacy on the internet, okay? But you have venues online where they are sharing in the surveillance system, and then you have YouTube that maintains the illusion of, oh, well, we have you have to report to us if you suspect someone is stealing your content. YouTube is making money off of the systematic theft of intellectual property, including by those that are celebrities, those that are in other parts of the world where you are targeted for an idea that you have that you don't even know that other people know about. For intellectual property that you have yet to share with others. And you may very well come up dead because someone else wants to, and the demons don't want you to take credit for it, such as prophecy regarding what's going to happen, regarding what God is doing, and some demon, some witch, some Jezebel whore wants to take credit for it, which she never could. She can't even intellectually comprehend it, let alone intelligently explain it. Okay? And the entity is engaging in what is sharing that. And this is happening on other parts of the world, on other platforms, where I maintain my intellectual property on YouTube. And YouTube is aware of that. And by the way, YouTube is not a private property. YouTube is the U.S. military, U.S. government. It's the government. All right. So this is the entity that is systematically poisoning me. And I'm speaking to this regarding the multifaceted means of surveillance. And then the entity is at night while they're essentially breathing over me. And I'm capturing very much relevant video of a bunch of stalkers that are surrounding me at the square. This is the same government. These are the same demons that are obsessively over me, and then they are puncturing my body at night. And this is what they're doing while they're poisoning me, and then they're putting needles in my body, and they are likely engaging in what is looking at what's going on in my body, looking at my blood, and doing so while they are systematically poisoning me, repeatedly poisoning. I do want to document, I went to the giant value store where I already documented the state gang stalking. And like I said, the venues that are in the business of food services based on what the entity is engaged in, and also as a matter of what is federal law, you're going to be subject to federal prison. This is how the entity maintains surveillance and covertly kills people through venues such as Stater Brothers and Starbucks and Wendy's and Grocery Outlet. And I documented McDonald's, and I have documented other venues where the entity is tampering with food, which is a very serious threat to your safety. All right. And these are sick people that don't have a reason to hate you. And in my book, even if you think you have a reason, you don't have a right to act on that. That's, again, this is a fixation based on obsession because they're mentally ill. And their mental illness is the product of what is demon possession. And that's what's being exposed here. Martial law is going to serve to remove many businesses from existence. The businesses that I've prosecuted, the businesses that I documented, they will not exist anymore. But they will be exhausted financially before that is the case. And that is because you cannot calculate the harms that they have inflicted, and they inflicted it with impunity, and I documented it. And that's also why those damages are going to be so destructive, and those companies will cease to exist. Also because they literally are a national and or international threat, okay, to the rest of the world, and a national security issue, concern, threat to the United States. All right. I want to document that. This is the entity that's harming me. This is a battery. It makes it difficult for me to walk. Then they're poisoning me, creating digestive issues. I'm experiencing physical symptoms. And then you have the entity that is obsessively stalking and monitoring me, and then harassing me and engaging in more of that stalking, like you saw today, stalking me by helicopter inside of the Upland Public Library, like you saw yesterday, stalking me by helicopter at the Ovid Family Community Library in 2 different cities where the entity kept the fake sun at the same time in 2 different cities. Okay, specifically over me, not in some general broad sky space. It's over the top of my head, and it's at the venues and at times that it's impossible. If it's there at 6 in the morning, which I documented, then that's not possibly the sun that I'm capturing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon over the top of my head. This is the entity that's engaged in what is puncturing my foot, and the government admits to it while they are stalking. Every company is going to be prosecuted civilly and criminally for it. Everyone that's a part of that population, and the entity will compensate, including the people of the state. This is P.O.C. It is currently 10:04 p.m. The entity is engaging in the documentation of the fake sun. Look at the podcasts are complete. May 24, 2026 is over an hour and a half. There was content that needed to be added. It is complete. Listen to that documentation. Look at the Google Drive, the documentation captured for, listen to and look at the visuals provided for the 24th. And then look at what was provided and documented yesterday, audibly, the podcast, and visibly for the 25th. And look at what I documented today. And all of it is mutually exclusive. And it is the evidence of the entity that is engaged in criminal monitoring, mentally ill as a population while they do so. And it is also mental illness that is underscored with a psychopathic means of what is maintaining the entity's indifference to being exposed for it is also relevant to mental illness. Where at the outset, the target individual is so crazy. They're imagining things. They're hallucinating. They're bipolar. They're on drugs. They're this and they're that. And you're looking at the psychos that are now engaging in what is stalking in front of everybody. And they're indifferent. And what else are you going to do? Because you are an obsessed vagina monitor and you refuse to abandon that post stalking. That indifference is obsession cloaked. Okay? That's obsession. And the ones that are obsessed stalking, San Bernardino County, that's gang stalking in Upland, California, every single last one of them are going to prison, federal prison. The entity that's engaged in what is defaming the character based on their criminal pattern of conduct and stating that it's not happening have served to have themselves committed based on what is absolutely happening, and you are committing it, and you're committing it as a pattern of conduct. You have engaged in the absurdity of maintaining police departments and fire departments and ambulance services just so that you can stalk people. That's psychotic. The entity will be committed with this evidence. You're in a whole fire truck, a gigantic vehicle, stalking. It's surveillance. There are no emergencies that they are learning about. There is no surprise under the fake sun. They're monitoring. Obsessive surveillance down to your genitalia, down to your pinky toe inside of your shoes. They're engaging in stalking. Surveillance is pursuant to stalking. That is absolutely psychotic, and the entity is going to be committed with this evidence. Companies will cease to exist based on this evidence. The entity will compensate an American citizen upon which they have levied war based on this evidence. This is the P.O.C. The mentally ill are stalking with light and doing so in concert with the mentally ill homosexuals that are stalking in the airspace. And those are the demon possessed that are obsessively consumed with that until the day they stop breathing. That is why martial law is necessary, because they are animals. And they are animals. What do animals give birth to? They give birth to animals. Animals don't give birth to human beings. These are demons who are engaging in that conduct as an entity obsessively. And I have shown and proven through the evidence that the mentally ill entity is unhinged and will continue even to its own demise. This is the necessity of martial law. Martial law will serve to remove all of the funding of terrorism, remove all of the resources of terrorism, remove all who are in positions of authority from engaging in terrorism, and also will serve to remove the ways in which the entity engaged in this ongoing system together. You're not traveling, you're not maintaining an airport when martial law is underway. You're not maintaining any sort of gang stalking business when martial law is underway. You're not traveling in and out of the state, in the city, when martial law is underway. This is the P.O.C. It is currently, by the way, when the entity is stalking, it's 10:08 p.m. at the Ovid Family Community Library. This is the admission regarding the mentally ill who are in need of martial law, and they will be subject to what are in massive involuntary commitments based on martial law. The entity that's going to be prosecuted and dealt with as a population with martial law, they will be subject to mass incarceration. This is the purpose of martial law, to lock down that population and to neutralize the threat that community is, that state is. And this is what's coming to California. This is P.O.C. The entity is puncturing my feet, putting needles in my feet, and doing so as they are systematically poisoning me. And the venues that I'm eating at, everywhere that I'm consuming food, this is the entity that is engaged in criminal surveillance, and you're providing food. You are in the service, the food industry. My receipts, literally my evidence that I ate, you're talking about what is federal prison. Okay, and that's literally axiomatic because the U.S. military, all the pattern of conduct goes with me to where you are. This is even when the fake sun is covered up, ladies and gentlemen, okay? And I'm just being polite because these demons are not ladies and gentlemen. The entity, the environment, the pattern of conduct goes with me wherever it is that I am consuming food. You are the one that gang stalked me and wanted me outside. You are the one that's going to prison when I am forced to consume food from you, where I would be minding my own business. So you need to be prepared for that. And I maintain my receipts. The ongoing investigation is underway, and you are going to prison by virtue of gang stalking as one that's in the food industry because you pose an unlawful threat, an intolerable threat. And it's not based on whether you actually did something to the food or not. Those in the food industry that are maintaining surveillance and further into murdering people, you're subject to federal prison. Understand, this is the law. This is what's going to happen. This is the pattern of conduct. It's currently 10:10 p.m. where the government's providing evidence against you regarding that being the absolute just law. P.O.C.